You have less in common with your near future than your ancient past. This is true for the whole world collectively. You have more in common with an ancient Roman 2,000 years ago than you do with probably your grandchildren or great-grandchildren. But also it's true in your individual life when it comes to your personal family circumstance as well as your personal Bitcoin stack. You have less in common with the near future than the past. It did not take as much time for Bitcoin, or it will not take as much time for Bitcoin to go from $100,000 to $1 million a coin as it did for it to go from 6 cents to $100,000. And guess what? For Bitcoin to go from 6 cents to $1 million will take way more time than for it to go from 1 million to 2 million. Every single doubling for Bitcoin is going to happen at a faster rate than the sum total of price growth from zero effectively to that previous target, right? So this is the point of today's video. You have less in common the future and the past, and Bitcoin is going to $1 million a coin. And we all are not ready for it. The rest of the world isn't ready for it because they're not off zero yet, right? But you're off zero, you're buying Bitcoin, you're DCAing, you've smash bought, right? But still, even us, hyper obsessing about Bitcoin, we aren't ready for this kind of future. One of the ways you have less in common with the near future and the ancient past is in the way that Bitcoin is custody. The majority of people in Bitcoin's early days had self-custody. In fact, it was the only way to have Bitcoin was self-custody. Then we had the invention of exchanges. We had a lot of exchanges. And now finally we're at the point where the majority of Bitcoin transactions and the majority of people owning Bitcoin own layer twos. The Bitcoin ETFs are effectively layer twos. Bitcoin equities and treasury companies and stocks or stonks are basically layer twos for Bitcoin, right? And in the far future, this is what it's going to look like. Okay, my friend, you are probably in that tiny little orange section that is 14 pixels on the size of your phone here, right? You can barely even see it. Every single person you see on the screen here represents 8 million people. There's 1,000 little dudes over there, 8 billion people in the world. We're putting up 1,000 little dudes, each one representing 1 million people, right? Okay, look at that. Put that in context of your local city. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is about one of those people, right? I'm flying to New York City next week, in which in New York City there's whatever, 8 or 9 of these people, right? 8 or 9 of these little white dudes live in New York City, right? So the point is, if you zoom in with that context all the way, what you see is that in this first little white dude, he's not entirely white. He's got a third that's dark orange and a third that's light orange. That first third are the multi-hole coiners, people with more than one Bitcoin, right? And so you might feel like you're too late because you only have 3 Bitcoin. And that person that orange pilled you all those years ago probably has 20. And you really wish that you would listen to him and you could have had 20, right? But guess what? Even if you're the lowest ranking member in the best orchestra in the world, you are still a top tier musician. The same thing is true here with Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if you're barely a multi-hole coiner, you're still a part of a very elite group that literally has more in common with Michael Saylor and Max Kaiser than the average person, right? Maybe you're not quite a multi-hole coiner. You're at 1 Bitcoin trying to get to 2. Feel free to, have a call with me and I can try to figure out how to help you do that. But whatever the case, if you're trying to get to become a multi-hole coiner, you're in that other third of that person, right? So we're looking at a couple million people that are ever going to be multi-hole coiners, a couple more million people that are ever going to be whole coiners, but then literally everybody else is going to be a partial coiner, right? Everybody else is a partial coiner. People with half of a Bitcoin, people with 1/10 of a Bitcoin, people with 500,000 sats, people with 0 sats. Everybody else in the world won't have that whole Bitcoin. So my point is, you have less in common with the future and the past. Don't judge yourself and where you rank in your Bitcoin stacking. Don't judge yourself based upon a tiny little community that is not representative of where the network is going, right? You are so busy comparing yourself to your fellow ancient Romans that you're forgetting the fact that the majority of people to be born are in front of us, not behind us. The majority of technological innovation is in front of us, not behind us. The majority of political change and turmoil and opportunity is in front of us, not behind us. And the same thing is true here. Don't be so distracted with the Bitcoin news stories of the moment and worrying about not having enough Bitcoin in the present moment that you forget where you are in context of the rest of the world. I know we live in a tiny little orange bubble, and it's a beautiful tiny little orange bubble, right? But it's still a tiny little orange bubble, right? You've got a dozen different options, maybe 50 or 100 different options of Bitcoin YouTube personalities to watch. Thank you for watching this one, by the way. You should subscribe if you haven't. But for real here, like, you only have a couple hundred options of potential Bitcoin treasury companies to buy. You only have a few options when it comes to which Bitcoin quote-unquote layer 2 to buy, and the vast majority of that is BlackRock layer 2, aka the ETF, right? Like, you only have so many options. The majority of options are in front of us. And the good news is that the majority of Bitcoin price action is in front of us, right? One of the other ways in which you have less in common with the future of the past is this aspect. This is an excellent post by Wicked Smart Bitcoin. It's what inspired this video today. It was very good. Wicked said, most people will save up $1 million worth of Bitcoin before they reach a whole coin. And a lot of people, I'm sure, in the comments section down below, are complaining and say, oh, that's not possible, Wicked, you're stupid, that doesn't make any sense. But the reality is that they don't understand what he's saying. What he's saying here is that, effectively, you have less in common with the near future and the age of past. Right now, because Bitcoin is less than $1 million, you can buy more than one Bitcoin for $1 million. You can buy multiple whole coins for $1 million, right? Years ago, you could buy dozens of coins for $1 million, right? But the point is, in the future, the majority of the world's millionaires are not yet buying Bitcoin. But when the world's millionaires, the majority of the world's millionaires, start allocating to Bitcoin, they will own $1 million of Bitcoin before they own a whole Bitcoin, okay? Do you understand how difficult it is for people to raise $1 million of liquidity, even for millionaires? That is not easy. And it still will yet be easier for somebody in the future to raise $1 million to acquire Bitcoin than to get a whole coin. I know this might all seem like it's obvious, and it might seem like, semantic, silliness, but it's important to have that context. It's important to base yourself in that reality, if assuming Bitcoin goes where we all think it's going, right? Bacon Hodl has an excellent comment here saying, most people don't have $1 million in fiat or won't ever have that level of resources. That future whole coiners will DCA their way there. Also implies the purchasing power of the cuckbuck falls markedly, yet only the upper 10% or 1% of the global population might achieve it, right? And Wicked replies to Bacon Hodl, most people will actually. It's just that 1 million won't be worth, crud by the time they do, right? And I think this is a very good point, right? The problem with becoming a fiat millionaire or a fiat billionaire is that there's no guarantee that you will remain at the top level of society, right? If you were a millionaire at the turn of the century, of the 20th century, right? If you were a millionaire in the year 1900, you don't nearly have the same kind of wealth you do in the present moment, right? If you buy a share of the US dollar political currency death token network, and you get 1% of all the dollars in existence, you won't have 1% of all the dollars of existence into the future. Why? Because you have less in common with the future and the past, and the majority of dollars that exist do not exist in the present moment. They exist in a non-predetermined, unpredictable time block of the future, right? There is already $1 quintillion of national debt in the United States. The reason you don't think there are is because most of the dollars have already been created in the future. They just haven't been time locked, released into the dollar token network, and distributed onto the holders, debasing them to zero, right? If you don't believe me, the first year that the United States of America had a national debt in the year 1779, which, by the way, happened right after we hyperinflated the Continental a couple years earlier, right? The first year we had national debt was in tens of millions. We only had $80 million of national debt in the United States. Now here we are closing in on $40 trillion. Within the next 4 years, we'll be knocking on the door of $50 trillion, right? By the time that my kids are my age watching these videos 20 years from now or whatever, they're going to be at the point where we're no longer talking in tens of trillions. We're talking in hundreds of quadrillions, and pretty soon, hundreds of trillions, soon looking into quadrillions. I can't even keep my numbers straight, right? The point is, you have less in common with the future and the past. This is a linear chart here of the national debt of the United States, of us creating more political currency death tokens. But if you actually zoom in on the 1800s and the 1900s, you will see it has been this kind of exponential chart pretty much consistently for the entirety of American history since 1779. We went from $50 million national debt to $500 million, $5 billion, $50 billion, $500 billion, $5 trillion. Now we're closing on $50 trillion, right? And every single time we add another zero, every single time we add more debt, every single point along the way, the American voters have complained about, oh, the national debt, this is unsustainable, blah, blah, blah. Sure, it's unsustainable. It's not unsustainable for the American political currency network because the benefit, in America's terms, in the American government's terms, the benefit of diluting those currency tokens is that we get to defend the dollar network with the military we're funding with those dollars, right? So yeah, sure, all the people whining and crying about, oh, the national debt's unsustainable, we gotta do something. They're not wrong. Sure, obviously it's not sustainable, but it's just going to keep going. It's never been sustainable. It's already insolvent. It is already collapsing, right? Except the people that are being collapsed upon are the users of the network, not the people creating the tokens, right? You have less in common with the future and the past. The majority of debt is in front of us, not behind us. The majority of the market cap of the real estate in the world is in front of us, not behind us. Real estate is going to appreciate in dollar terms. It's going to appreciate more in the next 20 years than the previous 200 years combined. And the same concept is true here with Bitcoin. Sure, you could be a billionaire today in terms of dollars. That's cute and wonderful. That's great. I mean, I would like $1 billion, don't get me wrong. If anyone wants to make a donation, you can put in a super chat down below. Thank you for the $1 billion donation. But the point is, in the future, being a billionaire won't mean anything. Being a millionaire won't be worth anything, right? But with Bitcoin, because you're owning a share of the network that cannot dilute onto its holders, if you acquire one whole Bitcoin or you acquire any whole fraction of the Bitcoin network, you hold that fraction indefinitely into the future, right? Money has less in common with the future and the past. After literally millennia of political currencies being a honeypot where they continue to be diluted onto the holders for the first time in human history, we are looking at a future completely unlike anything we've seen before. We're looking at a money that cannot be diluted onto its user base, even if the users decide that they want to be diluted upon, right? Obviously, they could go their own way on their own fork or whatever and dilute themselves into oblivion. But the point is, the network as a whole, we don't know how to destroy it. If we knew how to destroy it, I would destroy it because I would steal $2.5 trillion if you gave me the magic red button that I could just push, right? So that is my point here, is that eventually $1 million is going to be more difficult, or excuse me, going to be easier to acquire than a whole Bitcoin. And so inherently, because we know Bitcoin is finite in its supply, and because we know, and we have a quarter of a millennia of history to prove it, because we know we will continue to print dollars. We know this statement is true. There will be more millionaires in Bitcoin, US dollar millionaires. There will be more US millionaires in Bitcoin than Bitcoin whole coiners at some point, which sounds backwards to us today because being a Bitcoin millionaire right now means you have multiple whole coins because one Bitcoin at the time of recording is worth less than $1 million, right? And so that is the thing I think that is really a mind warp for you to keep in mind, right? 10 years from now, somebody will be patting themselves on the back that they bought $1 million of Bitcoin, and they will not even have a tenth of the size of a stack you do. Yes, that's because Bitcoin went up in value and the dollar also went down in value. However, it's true, right? $1 million used to be the magic number of a game show. Now it's $5 million, right? For a game show, right? You know, frankly, if you offered me $1 million to go compete on a game show, I maybe wouldn't take the money. But $5 million, that's a whole thing. Point being, it's really important you take your Bitcoin security seriously, you know, and there's going to be a point where earning incomes in dollars is no longer the best thing to do. And the more important thing to do is to maximize the Bitcoin you currently have. Leveraging with fiat debt, sure. Having Bitcoin denominated loans, sure. Using different kinds of products, opportunities, and offers available to you as somebody that is in this tiny, tiny, tiny elite group, yes, sure. Okay, this is the benefit. The benefit here is that congratulations, you are the top 1 in 500 Bitcoin holders in the world, the top 1 in 100, the top 1 in 1,000, whatever it is. Congratulations, you have opportunities. That's the new benefit to you that is not available to 99% of the population. The new cost is that you got to have somebody in your corner that is highly incentivized to help you discover what those opportunities are, to go from zero opportunities, to go from good opportunities to great, from great to best. If you want to have a conversation with me about how we can hopefully help increase your Bitcoin stack, I'm more than happy to have the conversation. My average client increases their Bitcoin stack by about 70% within the first year. This is not because I'm a genius. This is just because we put in more proof of work. I got a team of 40 people at the Bitcoin Advisor. That means literally every single year we're putting in 40 years of experience, right? The average Bitcoin holder on their own is getting 1 year of experience, and maybe in a given week they're only putting in 10 hours worth of work trying to discover those opportunities to increase the Bitcoin stack because they have a full-time job or they have a wife and kids or whatever, right? Versus having us on their side, they're paying us, you know, a results-based fee for, you know, helping them increase their Bitcoin stack, and they have 40 people putting in 3 times the hours per week into obsessing over this, like quite literally by having us in their network. Effectively, indirectly, they're getting a century worth of effort for every single year that passes by, right? So my point is not to say that, oh, we're better than you and blah, blah, blah. The point is to say that if you're going to be in this elite group where you have less in common in the future and the past, you're going to go from this point where you feel like there's not enough opportunities to where the opportunities are literally overwhelming, and you're going to need somebody in your corner to help you maximize those opportunities. So like I said, my average client, we help them increase 70% in Bitcoin terms in the first year. So in fiat terms, assuming Bitcoin goes up, that could be way more than 70%. But much more importantly is, how do we do that? We increase education, we increase offerings with helping them qualify and be able to get certain kinds of products that aren't necessarily universally available to the entire market, and ultimately helping them manage risk, reduce that downside, and capitalize on that potential upside. So if you want to book a call, great. Information is on the screen. If you don't and you want to complain in the comments below that I'm, promoting myself or whatever, that's fine. I literally can't help you all anyway. There's tens of thousands of people that follow me online here. 95% of you, I'm never ever going to have a conversation with because there's only one of me and I have less in common in the future and the past. I can't have a conversation with all of you. So if you want to be one of those special people where we actually focus on you individually and helping to increase your stack, reach out. If you're somebody that wants to complain and whine, and fine. Okay, bye. Go away. Anyway, let's get back to the conversation of the video here. The point is, whether you hire me or not, whatever you do, the emphasis is don't be a fool. Don't squander this opportunity, okay? Bitcoin's network has a lot of doublings to go, right? We're going to go from maybe one or two, right? Keep in mind, two of these little dudes in white on the screen here, that's 16 million people. I do not think there are 16 million people that have self-custody Bitcoin yet. I strongly do not believe that. Michael Saylor has 4 million followers on Twitter. There are 800,000 shareholders in MicroStrategy. There are 130,000 shareholders in MetaPlanet, at least at the time of recording. I believe there are about 4 million wallet addresses with more than a tenth of the Bitcoin. You would be very hard-pressed to convince me that there are more than 16 million people that own a significant non-zero balance of Bitcoin, right? Keep in mind, that is only 2 of the people on the screen here. Do you understand how dramatic of a change we have in front of us? You're so caught up in the debate around diminishing returns or not in terms of Bitcoin price since we went from 6 cents to over $100,000. You're so caught up in the diminishing returns of price, you're forgetting that the majority of Bitcoin adopters are in the next 5 years, not the previous 15. And guess what? When they all adopt, and now we're at tens of millions of people using Bitcoin, we still have less in common with the future and the past. This doesn't become untrue at some magic point, right? Even once everybody in the world has adopted Bitcoin, we have less in common with the future and the past because now we're actually building up. Instead of adopting the world in a zero-sum game of getting a larger share of a fixed pie, the whole world is on the same pie, on the same monetary standard, hyper-accelerating and growing the pie, right? Because life is not a zero-sum game. So that is my encouragement. Do you understand that every single time we add another one of those little white dudes and we turn them orange into the Bitcoin network, right? We convert them over to Bitcoin. Do you understand that every single time the network doubles in size, the price of Bitcoin will more than double in value? We went from 6 cents to $100,000 a coin, going from this fraction of one of these dudes to a slightly larger fraction of a fraction, right? Bitcoin price has become, Bitcoin the asset has become one of the world's most valuable assets with a minority of the world's population, okay? Roughly 1/3% of the world's wealth is now held in Bitcoin, even though way less than 1/3% of the world's population has adopted Bitcoin. Bitcoin's gonna run up so hard and so fast every single time more users adopt the network. And I know adoption feels slow. I know it feels like it takes time, but again, even with diminishing returns of speed in percentage terms, in absolute terms, you're still getting faster and faster rates of people adopting the Bitcoin network. And the critical thing to remind you all here of, and again, I'm going to get hate in the comments and I'm going to get the dislikes in the video. I see you all. I see all the data. I see what's happening here. I know I'm going to get it, but it's true. If you want the fun number go up stuff, you got to accept that the reality is if the Bitcoin network doubles in price, if the Bitcoin network doubles in users, and the price therefore runs up 5x or 10x or whatever, the scammers are going to come after you even faster, right? This is one of the reasons why I strongly beg you to get off exchanges, right? Obviously, if you want to be serious about increasing your Bitcoin stack more than just protecting what you have, feel free to reach out. Obviously, I got to charge for my time because I literally can't help everybody for free. I used to, 5+ years ago when I could help everybody for free, but I had less in common with my future in the past, right? The number of people following me and liking and subscribing to the channel eclipsed my ability to help them all for free. So unfortunately, I have to do that now. Even as much as I would love to have infinite time, I just don't. But the point is, even if you want to go the quote-unquote cheap route and just stick with what you have, my encouragement is just get off the exchanges, my friend. You need to understand the people in the highest risk position point are the people on exchanges. I just had a call earlier today with somebody who had he was a multi-hole coiner, we'll put it that way, who had all of his Bitcoin on exchange, right? And I'm not doxing anybody there because literally I have those calls every single week, right? I know a lot of you watching this video, a lot of you have a significant fraction of a Bitcoin on an exchange. A lot of you are whole coiners and you have that Bitcoin on an exchange. And some of you are multi-whole coiners. And dare I say, a couple of you, maybe 1 or 2 of you watching this, are multi-deca whole coiners watching this video that still have your Bitcoin on exchanges, right? And I know this to be true because I've seen it time and time and time again. I have personally seen at least 10 million, probably $15 million worth of Bitcoin lost in the last 6 months. And the vast majority of that Bitcoin lost was where? On exchanges. You have this fear of stepping into the unknown, right? Of going into self-custody. Why? Because you're scared about having less in common with your future in the past. Your whole Bitcoin journey up to this point has kept you on exchanges because you're tolerating the counterparty risk. And you're so scared of taking this self-custody because it's something unfamiliar, because it's not anything you've had in common with your history. You're so scared you don't do it. But then guess what? If you keep putting that off, if you keep procrastinating and dismissing the responsibility that you have been accepting, guess what? Eventually, somebody's going to steal it from you. You're so terrified of losing your Bitcoin in self-custody, somebody's going to steal it from you. You're so terrified that, in irony, that's exactly what's going to happen because you keep it in a higher risk setup. A lot of people on exchanges are so obsessed about what happens if my exchange goes down or they block withdrawals. You're so obsessed with that tiny probability happening to a large number of people, you're forgetting the much more likely outcome is that somebody just steals it from you. Sure, maybe you got a Bitcoin sitting on Coinbase and you're so nervous about, oh, I don't want to take self-custody. What if somebody steals my Bitcoin? Oh, what if Coinbase goes down? What if they take my Bitcoin? Blah, blah, blah. You're so nervous about a 1 in 100 chance, right? And again, I do not like Coinbase. I don't want to say despise, but maybe I will. I do not like Coinbase. But, excuse me, I need a drink of water. I do not like Coinbase. I don't like Coinbase enough that it made me cough. I do not like Coinbase. But even I'm willing to admit the probability of Coinbase going down and stealing all of your Bitcoin, it's very low. It just is, right? 90% chance, 95% chance. Coinbase is going to be just fine. They're not going to lose your Bitcoin. Don't take me, don't clip this and say I'm endorsing it. I'm not endorsing keeping your Bitcoin on exchanges, right? I'm saying though, whatever risk you're assigning to the possibility that your exchange loses your Bitcoin, there is inherently a higher risk that somebody steals your Bitcoin. Do you understand how easy it is for them to do that? All they need to do is get in your email account or SIM card swap you. How many of you watching have had your credit card information swiped at some point in your life? How many of you watching this video have had some kind of KYC information taken from you and then somebody uses that against you to lock you out of your accounts? That's all they need to do to steal your Bitcoin. The only reason your Bitcoin sitting on an exchange is still there is because somebody hasn't gone looking yet. They are so busy making money, stealing from people elsewhere in the world that they just haven't come across you yet, right? Because you might think, oh, Luke, you're just being a pessimist. I got a Bitcoin on Coinbase. I've had it there for 5 years. Ha ha, everything's fine. No, you've had your Bitcoin on Coinbase for 5 years and you've seen it double in price. But guess what? The next doubling inherently has more dollar signs per unit of Bitcoin you have than the previous doubling. Why? Because you have less in common with the future and the past, and it is inevitable that that Bitcoin is going to be millions and millions of dollars. So the only reason you haven't been stolen from with your little Bitcoin on Coinbase that isn't actually yours, the only reason you haven't been stolen from is because the freaking criminals are so busy going after people with 5 Bitcoin or 10 Bitcoin, they just haven't gotten around to you yet. So you should be thankful that you haven't stacked more Bitcoin. Seriously, because if you did, you would have lost it all, probably, right? So this is my encouragement, and then I'll shut up about it, but I'm making my conscience clear. I make hundreds of videos talking about this, and yet every single week I meet a couple people that have lost well over half of their money due to some error or to some theft, right? And it's very painful. So do not go to a Bitcoin conference if you have a significant amount of Bitcoin on an exchange. The reason why, if you have your exchange secured with your email, your Face ID, or your 2-factor authentication on your phone, do you understand what you are inviting here? You are inviting a $5 wrench attack. They don't want to go after the people that they can see on chain have a multi-sig setup, right? Like the reason I'm comfortable having my face, my name, my persona, my phone number, right, my email, all of that online, the reason I'm comfortable is because anybody that wants to look at my Bitcoin or somehow figures out which wallets are mine, they could easily figure out that literally I have everything multi-sigged, right? And even if I had single sig stuff, I'm not going to tell you that, right? Because why on earth would I tell you that? I'm asking for an invitation, right? So my point is, they're not going to go after the people with 10 Bitcoin and a multi-sig. They're going to go after you. Even though you have a smaller target, a smaller reward, you're 100 times easier to go after, right? So please, if you have a significant amount of Bitcoin, 50 grand, 100 grand, or $1 million of Bitcoin, please do not go to a Bitcoin meetup or Bitcoin conference in person, because that is as good as a $100,000 check. That is as good as $500,000 of uncut raw diamonds in your pocket, right? And that is a honeypot. And right now, people call me a fearmonger and they dislike the video and they unsubscribe because they think I'm being negative, they think I'm being pessimistic, but they don't understand you have less in common within your future and than the past. And eventually, this is exactly what's going to happen. Look at all these people in white in the world, right? How many of those people out there are malicious actors, are scammers, are evildoers that would be willing to come after you? Most of them not, right? 997 out of 1,000 people are not going to go after you because they're good people, they're kind people, they're not going to steal from you, they're not going to try to hack your account, they're not going to point a gun at you. They're not going to do that. But even if only 3 in 1,000 people decide to go after the Bitcoiners, that is 3 of these dudes in white, right? Like quite literally, there are probably 10 times more scammers coming after Bitcoin holders 20 years from now than there currently are Bitcoin holders. You can say I'm a pessimist as much as you want, but give us some thought, have some trouble sleeping at night, right? Obsess over it a little bit at 3 in the morning, have a little bit of an existential crisis, and then you will see that I am correct. And if you don't believe me, you can be on my side of the call where you see people lose money literally every day. So, point is, to wrap this video up on a positive note, right now, there are more Bitcoin whole coiners than there are Bitcoin millionaires. Eventually, though, there will be more Bitcoin fiat millionaires than whole coiners. And eventually, in the very long term, everybody will be a millionaire. And when everybody's a millionaire, nobody is. Kind of like the Incredibles movie, right? So point being, you've less in common future the past. And as crazy as $1 million Bitcoin might sound, just keep in mind, it is literally inevitable that not only is one Bitcoin going to be worth $1 million, but the majority of people stacking Bitcoin, working for Bitcoin, dollar cost averaging for Bitcoin, mortgaging their houses for Bitcoin, getting their small businesses on Bitcoin standards, the vast majority of those individuals are going to become Bitcoin millionaires, right? For every single Bitcoin millionaire in fiat terms there is today, there will literally be hundreds, eventually, hundreds times of more Bitcoin millionaires in the future when denominating in political currency, because political currency is a roaring dumpster fire going off a cliff. The majority of Bitcoin's users are in front of us, not behind us. That means the majority of Michael Saylors are in front of us, not behind us, right? The majority of Bitcoin YouTube personalities are in front of us, not behind us. And yes, the majority of scammers coming after your Bitcoin are in front of us, not behind us. And so if you are somebody that has been irresponsibly keeping an uncomfortable amount of Bitcoin on exchange, watching it go up and up and up in terms of US dollars, the more scared you should be, the more bullish you are on Bitcoin. Because the more bullish you are on Bitcoin, then the faster you have to accept that the scammers are going to go down and down and down the rankings. 10 years ago, they were going after people with 1,000 Bitcoin. Then they were going after people with 100 Bitcoin. Right now, they're going after people with, let's say, 10 to 50 Bitcoin. Give it a couple years, they'll be going after anybody with more than 1/10 of a Bitcoin on an exchange. Get off exchanges. The majority of scams, losses, and mistakes are in front of us, not behind us, and that is terrifying to me. Like I said, I've seen well over 10 million, probably at this point close to $15 million worth of Bitcoin lost or stolen in the last 6 months alone. The majority of losses are in front of us, not behind us. The majority of FTX moments are in front of us, not behind us. But of course, all these things are perceived as Luke Broyles just being a negative person. Oh, Luke, why are you so rude? Why are you so pessimistic? Why are you so heavy-handed, right? I'm just trying to speak the truth to you, because most other people making Bitcoin content is incentivized to only give you the number go up hopium. And I love to give you the number go up hopium. I'm a pretty bullish guy, right? If you watched any of my other videos where I'm talking about $100 million or $100 billion Bitcoin, right? Like, I'm a pretty bullish guy, but you don't get the joys of being a hyper bull without the fear and paranoia of being alarmed with how little people are prepared for that, right? And so the majority of price growth is also in front of us. Yes, there are all these scary things of all the scams and the malicious people. Sure, less than common future in the past there. However, guess what? All this means is that the majority of Bitcoin miners are in front of us, not behind us. The majority of fiat gains are in front of us, not behind us. And if you have somebody in your corner to help you accelerate your Bitcoin stacking, the majority of your Bitcoin stack gains are in front of you, not behind you. It's one of the reasons why I've been a happy client of the company I work for. It's one of the reasons why I advocate for it. My stack has increased significantly, yes, from my income, but even more so from my portfolio remanagement over the last 5 years. I'm a happy client. I'm a happy customer. My customers are happy because on average, they're growing anywhere from 5% more to 500% more Bitcoin over the course of the first 12 months. So whatever the case, it's undeniable, whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, you have less in common with the near future and the ancient past, and Bitcoin's going to $1 million. It is inevitable. Thank you for your time. If you watched to the end of the video, please subscribe. Otherwise, I don't know what you're doing. Thanks. See you next time.